Hi, thanks for joining me. You're watching Shape Up with Sue Daley. I'm going to share with you a series of videos covering tips and techniques of English paper piecing. Recently I asked the question, what's your favourite shape? The most popular answer, of course, was the hexagon. However, I realised very quickly that for some people it's the only shape they've ever tried. So I decided to share with you every Tuesday the many shapes and designs that we have here at Patchwork with Busy Fingers and how each of them go together. Remember, they're just like a jigsaw puzzle. If they go together, they will sew together. Why not join me here regularly for some fun ideas and tips with English paper piecing? Whether you're a beginner or an advanced student, everybody can learn something. And because it's everybody's favourite shape, I'm going to start with the humble hexagon. First of all, I'd like to go through some of the basic tools that I use and love. Pre-cut paper shapes. These are already pre-cut to the exact size that you need. For me, I don't have the time to be cutting out paper shapes. So they come beautifully packaged in a little bag like this with a number of different shapes in them. The acrylic template. These are what I use to rotary cut my fabric. They have a 1/4 inch seam built in on each one of them, and it makes life very easy when you're cutting multiple layers of fabric. The rotating mat. This used to be what I called a luxury item, but for me now it's a necessity. It rotates as you cut. So while you're cutting out, you can just twist it and cut and twist and cut, and it saves you cutting around your armpit, dancing around the table, and you can sit down with it, you can cut on your lap. It's a great, useful tool. Needles. My favourite needle is the Milliner's 11, also called a straw needle. It is a long, fine needle. The finer your needle, the finer your work will be. If you use a big fat crowbar, you'll have big fat crowbar stitches. Along with the needles, I have a specific thread that I use. Superior bottom line thread is my favourite. Normally, people would use a cotton thread with cotton fabric. However, with English paper piecing, it's not the same. When you're sewing your two pieces together, the thread's dragging across the top of the card constantly and it will shred. With the bottom line thread, it doesn't happen. It's a very fine thread and it means you don't have to colour match exactly to your fabric. They're available in a large reel of 1420 yards, a small packet of 6 super bobs, or you can buy a whole donut with 36 different colours. My favourite tool of all is the Sew-Line glue pen. I've not always used the Sew-Line glue pen, but when I introduced it to the market a number of years back, it has revolutionised the whole technique, and it has become something that everybody wants to use and made English paper piecing so much easier, so much more enjoyable, and so much quicker. And everybody wants to know what type of scissors I use. My favourite scissors are the Karen K. Buckley embroidery scissors. They have a serrated edge on them and they have pliable handles, and they're also beautiful to use with needle turn applique. So one important thing that you all need to know is how to measure English paper piecing shapes. The measurement is the side measurement. So with a hexagon you have 6 sides and each side is equal. So the measurement of this hexagon is 1 inch. So this side is 1 inch, this side is 1 inch, and this side is 1 inch, and so on and so on. However, when you have a clamshell or an apple core, they are measured very differently. The clamshell is measured through the middle, right down through the centre, and so is the apple core shape, right down through the centre. These two shapes started as circles, so it is the diameter of the circle that we started with. The circle started off as a whole shape and we took out the 2 bites at the side, and the same with the apple core. Started as a circle, as a 2-inch circle, and we took out a bite from either side, and that's why we measure down through the centre of those 2 shapes only. So, first of all we're going to cut out some shapes. I said we'd start with the humble hexagon. We're going to take our acrylic template and our rotary cutter. Now it doesn't matter what size rotary cutter you use. I use the 28mm or the 45, they're my favourite ones. However, if you like to use the larger one, that's okay too. The very, very small 18mm one does not work very well with the template. However, for fussy cutting, when you're only cutting through one layer of fabric, it's perfect. Just place your fabric onto your rotating mat, put your template on top. I have about 6 layers there, and it depends on how sharp your rotary cutter blade is as to how many layers you can cut through. Okay, and there we have all the layers. In fact, there was 8, not 6. I'm going to take one piece of fabric and my hexagon paper. Now remember, these shapes, the busy finger shapes, have a special coating on the outside that works perfectly with the glue pen. When you're gluing with the glue pen, you need to work with the edge of your pen, not the very flat of it. If you're working with the flat, you're using way too much glue. Remember, less is more. You're going to run your glue pen along one side at a time. And you're going to keep it away from the edge a little bit. So you're working on the paper, but you're keeping the glue slightly in from the very edge. You're going to fold the fabric over, and you're going to work in the same direction. So if you work in an anti-clockwise direction, keep working in that way. If you work in a clockwise direction, that's okay too. Later on down the track, when we get to some other videos, you'll understand why I like to work in the same direction. So continue around the outside edge of the hexagon, and remember, less is more, and pull your points in quite firmly so they're nice and sharp and nice and tight. If you do all your gluing properly, then sewing it together will be so much simpler. If you're a bit slap happy with your gluing, then sewing it together is going to be a problem for you. Then we're going to take a needle and a thread. And some of you are going to probably think, wow, the eye of those needles are very small. However, if you are having trouble threading it, just hold the eye over something white and you can actually see that there's a hole in it, and it makes it much easier for you to thread it. I have the bottom line thread, and I put a knot in the very end of it. I'm going to take 2 shapes and put them together. Make sure you line up the edges, and I'm going to run my needle in between the paper and the fabric so I lose my knot right up into that corner. I'm going to take 1 stitch at the very corner. I'm going to go in for another stitch, and I'm going to leave my needle in my work. And this is what I call the knicker knot. Many people never start and finish with their English paper piecing properly, and that leads itself to the seams coming undone down the track. So if you start and finish properly, you won't have any problems with that. So the knicker knot starts with a thread at the front of your work and 2 threads coming out of the eye of the needle at the back. You're going to take the thread at the front, you're going to wrap it under to the left, take it to the back, and the 2 threads that are coming out of the eye of the needle, you will take it under towards the right and take it to the back. So both your threads are going opposite directions. One will go to the left, one will go to the right, and they will wrap underneath the needle. You'll pull your thread through and you will have a little knot in the shape of an 8. and you pull that tight, and that will lock off your stitches to start with. If you don't have that little figure 8 in your thread, that means you've wrapped your thread in the same direction. When you're sewing them together, you're going to sew from the back to the front, straight across. The shortest distance from here to here is in a straight line. Don't be tempted to sew on an angle like that. Sew from the back to the front, straight across. You're picking up about 2 threads of fabric either side. If you only pick up 1 thread of fabric, it's going to act like drawn thread work, and it's going to pull the thread out of your fabric, so when you open your seam up, you're going to be able to see through the other side of your seam, and you don't want that to happen. So about 2 threads either side, and my stitches are about 1.5 millimeters apart. You're going to continue stitching across the top of your hexagon until you get to the other end. Now some shapes you would get to the end and you would finish it off, so I would do a knicker knot at the end, and I would cut my thread. I would leave a little tail before I cut it, and then I would continue on with adding my next piece. However, when you're working with hexagons, you can often travel your thread up behind your work so that you're not constantly cutting it and starting again. And as I just stitch up to the end here, I'll show you what I mean. When I get up to that last corner there, I do 2 stitches at the corner just to hold everything in place, and I can open up my work and I can run my thread up in behind so that it comes out at the next seam where I'd like to start. So what I'm going to do now is sew another hexagon in here. And I'm going to start here. I'm going to sew down to the point, do 2 stitches, then I'm going to fold everything up in my hand, do 2 more stitches and go to the end, and then I'll travel my thread up behind just as I did before. The thing with paper piecing is when you're doing Y seams, it's very easy because you can just bend it all up in your hand and it makes life very easy. Y seams are something that people shy away from, but with English piecing, everything's perfect. So here I've got my little flower that I finished earlier. So we have cut 1 for the middle, and we've sewn 6 hexagons around the outside. So this is a 1-inch hexagon flower. And this was traditionally known as Grandma's Flower Garden. So people would make many of these to produce a whole quilt. And sometimes they would just sew them all together, or they would add framing hexagons around here in a plain colour and just add lots of flowers to their quilt. I hope that you've picked up a useful tip today, and each week you're going to get the chance to ask questions about English paper piecing. So why not subscribe below and receive a regular video update? And remember, if you have a question to ask, I'm happy to share the answer with you.